What transforms a weapon dismissed as obsolete into a legendary instrument of war? The M1919A4 Browning machine gun entered World War II, carrying the weight of skepticism. Critics questioned its water-cooled predecessor's complexity. Military analysts doubted whether an air-cooled design could withstand the brutal demands of modern combat. Procurement officers worried about reliability under sustained fire. Yet on a frozen morning in December 1944, near the Belgian town of Bastogne, a single M1919A4 and the men who wielded it would shatter an entire German battalion's advance, turning doubt into legend and transforming military doctrine forever. This is not merely the story of a machine gun. This is the chronicle of American ingenuity, battlefield adaptation, and the warriors who discovered that sometimes the most criticized tools become the most dependable when everything hangs in the balance. The M1919A4 would prove that reliability is not born in testing facilities or demonstrated through technical specifications. True reliability emerges from fire and blood, from frozen fingers maintaining steady aim, from mechanisms that continue functioning when failure means death. The weapon's journey from questioned design to battlefield dominance reveals fundamental truths about warfare, technology, and human determination. Before the M1919A4 carved its place in history, before it became synonymous with American firepower, it faced a gauntlet of doubt that nearly prevented its widespread adoption. Understanding how this weapon overcame institutional resistance and technical challenges illuminates the complex relationship between innovation and tradition in military affairs. John Moses Browning died in 1926, but his genius continued shaping warfare long after his passing. The M1919 machine gun represented the culmination of decades spent perfecting automatic weapons design. Born from the water-cooled M1917, itself a modification of Browning's revolutionary design principles, the M1919 emerged as an attempt to create a lighter, more mobile automatic weapon suitable for the mechanized warfare that military theorists predicted would dominate future conflicts. The original M1919 underwent continuous refinement throughout the 1920s and 1930s. The A4 variant, introduced in 1936, featured a lighter barrel, improved sights and modifications that reduced weight while maintaining firepower. Chambered in .30-6 Springfield, the same cartridge that powered the M1 Garand rifle, the M1919A4 weighed approximately 31 pounds without its tripod. This made it significantly lighter than the M1917's water cooling system added bulk, yet the reduction came at a perceived cost. Military conservatives viewed air cooling with suspicion. The water-cooled M1917 could fire indefinitely as long as water circulated through its jacket. The M1919A4's air-cooled barrel, by contrast, required careful fire discipline to prevent overheating. Critics pointed to tests where sustained fire caused barrels to warp or fail. They questioned whether soldiers under combat stress would exercise the discipline necessary to prevent mechanical failure. These concerns nearly derailed the M1919A4's adoption as the standard medium machine gun for American forces. Yet several forward-thinking officers recognized that future warfare demanded mobility above all else. The Spanish Civil War provided sobering lessons about static defenses. German successes in Poland and France demonstrated that rapid maneuver, not firepower alone, determined modern battle outcomes. A machine gun crew needed to move with advancing infantry, establish firing positions quickly, and displace before enemy artillery found them. The M1917's bulk made such tactics nearly impossible. The M1919A4, despite its limitations, offered the mobility that modern warfare demanded. The intriguing contradiction at the heart of the M1919A4 story involves this tension between firepower and mobility. American military doctrine entering World War II emphasized both overwhelming fire superiority and rapid maneuver. These requirements often conflicted. Heavy weapons provided devastating firepower but slowed movement. Light weapons enabled mobility but sacrificed sustained fire capability. The M1919A4 attempted to balance these competing demands, and its success or failure would be measured not in peacetime tests, but in desperate combat, where miscalculation meant death. The weapon's development coincided with broader transformations in infantry tactics and combined arms doctrine. American military planners studied European conflicts with increasing concern as the 1930s progressed. The rise of mechanized warfare, demonstrated dramatically in Spain and later in Poland, suggested that future battles would bear little resemblance to the static trench warfare that had characterized World War I. Tanks, aircraft, and motorized infantry promised to restore mobility to battlefields that had become killing grounds of barbed wire and machine guns. This tactical revolution demanded new equipment that could keep pace with mechanized forces while providing the firepower necessary to exploit breakthroughs or defend against enemy penetrations. The M1919A4 emerged as potential solution to this requirement. Its reduced weight compared to water-cooled predecessors made it suitable for mounting on vehicles or rapid displacement by infantry crews. Its .30-06 cartridge provided sufficient range and penetration to engage targets at distances typical of mechanized warfare. Its recoil-operated mechanism, refined through decades of Browning's engineering genius, promised reliability that would prove essential in fluid combat situations. The interwar period also witnessed significant debates within military circles about the future character of warfare. Some theorists predicted that aviation would dominate, rendering ground forces secondary. Others emphasized armored warfare as the decisive factor. Still others maintained that infantry remained paramount, with supporting arms serving merely to enable infantrymen to close with and destroy the enemy. These competing visions influenced equipment development, with each faction advocating for weapons that aligned with their strategic perspective. The M1919A4's development occurred within this contentious environment. Advocates for mobility saw the weapon as an essential component of combined arms teams that would maneuver rapidly across fluid battlefields. Those emphasizing firepower questioned whether the weapon could deliver sufficient sustained fire to fulfill traditional machine gun roles. The resolution of this debate would ultimately come not from theoretical analysis, but from practical battlefield testing, where abstract concepts confronted harsh realities of combat. The M1919A4's development cannot be separated from broader transformations in American military thinking during the interwar period. World War I left American forces with equipment designed for trench warfare's static brutality. The M1917 machine gun, water-cooled and mounted on heavy tripods, embodied this philosophy. Crews established fixed positions, created interlocking fields of fire, and maintained those positions throughout extended engagements. This approach proved devastatingly effective in defensive operations, but offered little flexibility for offensive maneuver. Tank warfare's emergence during World War I's final years suggested that future conflicts would emphasize mobility. Theorists like JFC, Fuller and Basil Littlehart argued that mechanized forces could penetrate enemy lines, bypass strongpoints, and paralyze opponents through disruption rather than destruction. American military planners, though more conservative than their European counterparts, recognized these theories' validity. The question became how to equip infantry to operate alongside mechanized forces without sacrificing the firepower that American doctrine emphasized. The Ordnance Department faced competing pressures: budget constraints following World War I, limited development programs, industrial capacity focused on civilian production during the Depression years. Procurement officials hesitated to invest heavily in untested designs when proven weapons existed in war surplus stocks. These practical considerations reinforced natural institutional conservatism that resisted change unless absolutely necessary. Despite these obstacles, development of lighter automatic weapons continued throughout the 1930s. The M1919 underwent numerous modifications as designers sought optimal balance between weight, firepower, and reliability. Early versions encountered problems. Lightweight barrels overheated quickly. Simplified cooling mechanisms proved insufficient for sustained fire. Feed mechanisms jammed when dust or debris compromised tolerances. Each problem generated criticism from officers who viewed the entire project as unnecessary departure from proven M1917 design. The M1919A4 variant addressed many earlier problems while introducing refinements that improved battlefield utility. Engineers strengthened the barrel design to better withstand heat stress. They modified the gas system to ensure reliable cycling across varying ammunition conditions. The tripod mount received improvements that enhanced stability while reducing weight. Feed mechanisms incorporated tighter tolerances that reduced jamming while remaining robust enough for field conditions. Testing revealed remaining concerns. Sustained fire tests demonstrated that the M1919A4 could not match the M1917's ability to maintain continuous fire indefinitely. Barrels required changing after firing approximately 500 rounds in rapid succession. Critics seized on this limitation as proof that air cooling fundamentally compromised the weapon's utility. They argued that combat situations would not allow the careful fire discipline necessary to prevent overheating. Proponents countered that battlefield experience rarely required truly continuous fire. Machine gun employment doctrine emphasized controlled bursts rather than sustained streams. Proper fire discipline conserved ammunition while maintaining suppressive effect. The M1919A4's reduced weight enabled repositioning between firing sequences, making the weapon less vulnerable to counter-battery fire. These tactical advantages, they argued, outweighed theoretical limitations that might prove irrelevant under actual combat conditions. This debate reflected deeper divisions within American military culture. Conservative officers, often veterans of World War I, trusted proven designs and viewed innovation skeptically. Progressive officers, frequently younger men influenced by European military thinkers, emphasized adaptation to new realities. The argument over the M1919A4 became proxy for larger questions about how American forces should prepare for future conflicts. The institutional dynamics surrounding the M1919A4's adoption revealed much about military decision-making processes. Senior officers who had built their careers around specific weapon systems naturally resisted changes that might render their expertise obsolete. Junior officers seeking advancement sometimes embraced innovation as means to distinguish themselves from senior competitors. Civilian officials in the War Department navigated between military advice and budgetary constraints while attempting to prepare forces for uncertain future conflicts. Industrial considerations also influenced the debate. Manufacturing the M1919A4 required different tooling and techniques than producing the M1917. Companies that had invested in water-cooled machine gun production faced potential losses if the military shifted to air-cooled designs. Labor unions representing workers in defense industries advocated for decisions that protected jobs. These economic factors intertwined with military considerations, complicating what might otherwise have been straightforward technical decisions. Events in Europe forced resolution. Germany's stunning victories in 1939 and 1940 demonstrated that modern warfare favored mobile forces employing combined arms tactics. Static defenses, no matter how well armed, could be bypassed and rendered irrelevant. American military planners recognized that war with Germany, increasingly likely as the Roosevelt administration moved away from neutrality, would require forces capable of matching German mobility and firepower. The M1919A4 entered production as the standard medium machine gun for American forces. Contracts went to multiple manufacturers to ensure adequate supply as military expansion accelerated. Browning Arms Company, Colt, and other firms tooled up for mass production. By Pearl Harbor, thousands of M1919A4s equipped regular Army units, National Guard formations, and new divisions training across the United States. Initial combat experience proved mixed. Early engagements in North Africa revealed both strengths and weaknesses. The weapon's lighter weight enabled rapid deployment in desert warfare's fluid conditions. Machine gun crews could displace quickly when enemy forces threatened their positions. The tripod mount provided stability for accurate fire at extended ranges. However, sand infiltration caused jamming problems. Crews learned to maintain weapons meticulously, covering mechanisms when not in use and cleaning them constantly. The harsh environment tested both weapon and operators. Lessons from North Africa informed training and doctrine refinement. The Army emphasized proper maintenance procedures. Armorers modified dust covers to better protect feed mechanisms. Crews learned optimal firing patterns that maintained suppressive effect while preventing overheating. Officers developed tactics that maximized the M1919A4's mobility advantages while compensating for its limitations compared to heavier weapons. The Sicily and Italy campaigns provided additional combat experience. Mountain warfare's vertical dimension created unique challenges. Machine gun positions established on high ground dominated approaches, but became vulnerable to artillery and mortar fire. The M1919A4's relative portability enabled crews to move weapons up difficult terrain and establish firing positions that heavier weapons could not reach. This capability proved particularly valuable in Italy's mountainous interior, where mobility often determined tactical success. Italian theater combat also revealed the importance of proper crew training in maximizing weapon effectiveness. Green units, newly arrived from stateside training, sometimes employed machine guns ineffectively through poor position selection or inadequate fire discipline. Veteran units demonstrated remarkable proficiency, establishing interlocking fields of fire that channeled enemy movements into killing zones or employing indirect fire techniques that engaged targets beyond line of sight. These differences in effectiveness stemmed not from equipment variations, but from experience and training quality that separated novice crews from expert practitioners. The hedgerow fighting in Normandy following D-Day presented yet another set of challenges that tested the M1919A4's versatility. Norman bocage country, divided into small fields surrounded by thick hedgerows grown over centuries, created close-range combat conditions that negated many advantages of American firepower superiority. German defenders positioned in hedgerows could engage American forces at ranges where superior artillery and tank support provided limited advantage. Infantry-to-infantry combat dominated, making machine gun employment critical to tactical success. Crews learned to position weapons to enfilade hedgerows rather than engaging frontally where German positions enjoyed maximum protection. They developed techniques for suppressing German positions, while assault elements maneuvered to flanking positions. The M1919A4's relatively quick setup time enabled crews to establish hasty firing positions that provided critical support during fluid small unit actions. These tactics, developed through costly trial and error, gradually enabled American forces to overcome defensive advantages that Norman terrain provided German defenders. The breakout from Normandy and subsequent pursuit across France demonstrated the M1919A4's suitability for mobile warfare. Mechanized columns advancing rapidly toward Germany required firepower that could keep pace with armor and motorized infantry. Machine guns mounted on vehicles provided immediate fire support when columns encountered resistance. Dismounted employment remained essential when German forces established defensive positions that required reduction before advance could continue. The M1919A4's design facilitated both mounted and dismounted employment modes, enabling rapid transitions that maintained operational tempo. Reliability in military equipment represents more than mechanical function. True reliability encompasses the weapon's ability to perform under conditions that destroy lesser designs. It includes the operator's confidence that the weapon will function when needed most. It extends to maintainability under field conditions where specialized tools and facilities do not exist. The M1919A4's evolution toward genuine reliability required addressing all these dimensions simultaneously. The weapon's mechanical reliability stemmed from John Browning's fundamental design philosophy. Browning favored simplicity and robust construction. He designed mechanisms with generous tolerances that functioned despite dirt, wear, or imperfect ammunition. The M1919A4 inherited these characteristics. Its recoil-operated action used the cartridge's firing force to cycle the mechanism, eliminating need for external power or complex gas systems. The design employed few small parts susceptible to loss or damage. Disassembly for maintenance required no special tools and could be accomplished by trained operators under field conditions. However, mechanical soundness alone did not ensure battlefield reliability. Operators needed confidence born from experience and training. Early combat encounters sometimes shook this confidence when weapons malfunctioned due to improper maintenance or employment beyond design parameters. Inexperienced crews sometimes fired continuous bursts that overheated barrels, causing failures that reinforced skepticism about air cooling. Building operator confidence required comprehensive training that taught proper employment techniques while demonstrating the weapon's actual capabilities under realistic conditions. Training programs evolved to address these challenges. The Army established machine gun schools that provided intensive instruction in weapon operation, maintenance, and tactical employment. Instructors emphasized fire discipline, teaching crews to fire controlled bursts that maintained suppressive effect while preventing overheating. They demonstrated barrel-changing procedures until crews could accomplish the task quickly, even under stress. They created scenarios that simulated combat conditions, forcing students to maintain weapons under difficult circumstances while continuing to engage targets. These training innovations produced crews who understood their weapons' capabilities and limitations. They learned that the M1919A4 could not duplicate the M1917's ability to fire continuously for extended periods. However, they also discovered that proper technique allowed maintaining effective fire almost indefinitely through barrel changes and careful ammunition management. This knowledge transformed doubt into confidence. Crews came to trust their weapons because they understood how to employ them effectively. Maintainability represented another critical reliability dimension. Combat weapons must function despite exposure to mud, water, sand, and other contaminants. They must remain operational when cleaning supplies run low and maintenance time proves limited. The M1919A4's design facilitated field maintenance through thoughtful engineering that anticipated difficult conditions. The weapon broke down into major assemblies that crews could disassemble and clean without tools. The barrel assembly lifted clear after releasing a simple latch. The bolt and operating group came free through straightforward procedures that soldiers learned quickly. Critical parts featured robust construction that resisted damage from routine handling. Springs and small components nested in positions that protected them from loss during disassembly. Armorers could repair or replace most components using basic tools and supplies available at company level. Barrels wore out eventually, but could be changed by trained personnel without returning weapons to depot facilities. Feed mechanisms required occasional adjustment, but remained accessible for maintenance. This field maintainability meant that weapons continued functioning throughout extended campaigns, where supply lines stretched thin and depot support became irregular. The concept of sustainable firepower emerged as central to understanding the M1919A4's battlefield role. Raw firepower means little if unsustainable beyond brief bursts. Effective machine gun employment requires maintaining suppressive fire long enough to enable maneuver elements to close with enemy positions. This demands weapon designs that balance firing rate, ammunition capacity, barrel life, and cooling capacity to sustain tactical effect throughout extended engagements. The M1919A4's 3006 cartridge provided excellent range and penetration, while remaining small enough that crews could carry substantial ammunition loads. Standard belts contained 250 rounds, sufficient for extended firing sequences. Ammunition came packed in metal cans that protected it from environmental damage, while remaining portable enough for infantry to carry. This combination enabled crews to sustain fire throughout engagements that might last hours. Fire discipline transformed the M1919A4's theoretical limitations into practical advantages. Crews learned to fire 6 to 9 round bursts that placed accurate fire on targets while preventing barrel overheating. They timed bursts to maintain pressure on enemy positions without wasting ammunition on targets already suppressed. This disciplined approach conserved ammunition while extending barrel life, enabling crews to maintain fire throughout extended engagements without requiring barrel changes. The weapon's accuracy at extended ranges surprised many who initially doubted air-cooled designs. Proper tripod mounting provided stable platform that enabled precision fire beyond 600 yards. The 3006 cartridge retained sufficient energy at these ranges to penetrate cover and defeat equipment. Crews exploited this accuracy to engage targets that rifle fire could not effectively reach, extending their unit's engagement envelope and providing commanders with greater tactical flexibility. Psychological impact represented often overlooked aspect of machine gun effectiveness. The distinctive sound of sustained automatic fire affects soldiers' behavior regardless of actual casualties inflicted. Troops hearing machine gun fire instinctively seek cover, disrupting their formations and slowing movement. Even inaccurate fire achieves suppressive effect by forcing enemy soldiers to ground and degrading their unit cohesion. The M1919A4's sustained fire capability, when properly employed, created psychological pressure that amplified its physical effects. Enemy forces, hearing the weapon's distinctive report, understood they faced sustained automatic fire that would continue as long as they remained exposed. This knowledge shaped their behavior, making them more cautious and less aggressive. Tactical advantages often resulted more from this psychological pressure than from actual casualties inflicted. The integration of machine guns into combined arms teams represented sophisticated evolution in American tactical doctrine. Early in the war, units sometimes employed machine guns in isolation, establishing positions without adequate infantry support or failing to coordinate fire with maneuver elements. Combat experience taught that maximum effectiveness required integrating machine gun fire with other weapon systems and tactical actions. Infantry squads learned to maneuver under covering fire provided by attached machine gun teams. Squad leaders coordinated movements with machine gun crews, timing advances to exploit moments when suppressive fire forced enemy soldiers to cover. This coordination required communication under difficult conditions and mutual understanding between infantry and machine gun elements. Units that mastered these skills achieved tactical advantages that less proficient formations could not match. Artillery forward observers learned to call fire missions that complemented machine gun engagement. Observers identified targets beyond machine gun range or protected positions requiring indirect fire. Artillery suppressed these targets, while machine guns engaged enemy forces attempting to maneuver. This combination of direct and indirect fire created multiple dilemmas for enemy commanders who found themselves under pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. Tank-infantry cooperation benefited particularly from effective machine gun employment. Tanks provided mobile firepower and armor protection, but remained vulnerable to infantry portable anti-tank weapons at close range. Infantry protected tanks from these threats, while tanks suppressed enemy positions with their main guns. Machine guns bridged the gap between tank armament and rifle fire, providing sustained suppression at ranges where tank guns proved excessive and rifle fire insufficient. The development of specialized ammunition enhanced the M1919A4's versatility. Standard ball ammunition provided excellent general-purpose capability. Armor-piercing rounds enabled engagement of light armored vehicles and fortified positions. Tracer rounds facilitated fire adjustment and created additional psychological effect. Incendiary ammunition proved effective against fuel storage and other flammable targets. Crews learned to mix ammunition types within belts, creating sequences optimized for specific tactical situations. Night fighting presented unique challenges that demanded specialized techniques. Darkness concealed enemy movements, while making fire adjustment difficult. Tracer ammunition became double-edged sword, enabling fire control but revealing gun positions to enemy observers. Crews developed methods for employing tracers judiciously, firing short bursts that provided targeting information without exposing positions unnecessarily. They learned to use indirect fire techniques, lobbing rounds into areas where enemy activity was suspected, even without visible targets. Cold weather operations, particularly during the Battle of the Bulge, tested weapon and crew under extreme environmental conditions. Lubricants thickened or froze, causing malfunctions if standard maintenance procedures were followed. Crews learned to use lighter oils or operate weapons dry when temperatures dropped severely. Snow and ice accumulation threatened to block mechanisms or freeze moving parts. Constant vigilance and frequent maintenance proved necessary to keep weapons operational in conditions that seemed designed to defeat mechanical devices. The relationship between ammunition supply and tactical effectiveness became increasingly apparent as campaigns progressed. Even the most reliable weapon becomes useless without adequate ammunition. The American logistics system's ability to maintain steady ammunition flow to forward units proved crucial to sustaining machine gun employment. Quartermasters developed techniques for pre-positioning ammunition caches that enabled crews to maintain fire during critical engagements. Ammunition bearers, often overlooked in combat narratives, played essential roles by ensuring that guns remained supplied during extended battles. The Ardennes offensive caught Allied forces off guard in December 1944. German forces, thought to be exhausted after months of retreat, launched desperate counterattack through Belgium's forested hills. The offensive aimed to split Allied armies, capture vital supplies, and force negotiated settlement that might salvage something from Germany's deteriorating strategic position. Initial success shocked Allied commanders who had believed German forces lacked capability for major offensive operations. American units rushed to stem the penetration, found themselves scattered and outnumbered. The 101st Airborne Division, still recovering from Operation Market Garden's demands, deployed to defend the critical road junction at Bastogne. The town's control would determine whether German forces could maintain momentum. If Bastogne fell, Roads radiating from it would enable German mechanized forces to exploit their breakthrough. If American forces held, German units would bog down attempting to bypass the town, giving Allied reserves time to contain the penetration. The defense of Bastogne produced numerous examples of American determination and tactical skill. Paratroopers, lightly armed and lacking heavy weapons, organic to regular infantry divisions, faced German forces, including armor and artillery. The defenders established perimeter defense, using natural terrain features and hasty fortifications to compensate for numerical and material disadvantages. Machine gun positions became critical to this defense, providing the sustained firepower necessary to break up German attacks before assault troops reached American lines. One position, manned by a sergeant whose name became legend among survivors, illustrated the M1919A4's capability when employed with skill and determination. The position occupied slight rise overlooking approaches from the east. The sergeant, a veteran of campaigns in North Africa and Italy, understood both his weapons capabilities and the importance of his position to the overall defense. German forces, attempting to penetrate the perimeter, would have to cross open ground swept by his field of fire. The attack came before dawn, on a morning when temperatures dropped well below freezing. German infantry, supported by armored vehicles, advanced in battalion strength against the sector defended by the sergeant's company. The company numbered fewer than 100 effectives after weeks of continuous combat. They faced attacking forces that outnumbered them nearly 5-1. Everything depended on killing zones established by machine gun positions that could break up German formations before they reached American lines. The sergeant opened fire at ranges exceeding 400 yards. His first burst struck German infantry as they emerged from tree line and began crossing open ground. Tracers arced into the darkness, marking the storm of bullets converging on German positions. Soldiers fell or dove for cover. The advance staggered as units lost cohesion under fire that came from unexpected positions. German forces, professional soldiers experienced in Eastern Front combat, responded quickly. Mortars engaged suspected machine gun positions. Artillery fire began falling across American lines. Supporting armor, multiple assault guns mounting heavy cannon engaged targets with direct fire. The sergeant's position attracted heavy fire as Germans attempted to suppress or destroy the weapon that had disrupted their advance. The sergeant continued firing, changing targets as German units attempted to flank his position or concentrate for renewed assault. His assistant fed ammunition belts while calling corrections to fire. The gunner adjusted aim, walking fire across German positions and catching soldiers as they moved between cover. Barrel temperature rose despite controlled bursts. Heat shimmers became visible around the weapon's receiver. Still, the firing continued. Barrel changes occurred during brief lulls when German forces reorganized for renewed assault. The assistant lifted the hot barrel clear using asbestos gloves, dropping it aside to cool while securing fresh barrel in position. The entire procedure took seconds. Firing resumed immediately, catching German soldiers who had begun advancing during what they hoped was temporary cessation. The battle continued for hours. German forces launched repeated assaults against positions they needed to secure to continue their advance. American defenders, exhausted from weeks of combat and now outnumbered by fresh enemy forces, held through determination and superior firepower. The sergeant's M1919A4 became fulcrum of the defense, breaking up attacks before they gained momentum and inflicting casualties that degraded German unit effectiveness. Ammunition consumption reached extraordinary levels. The crew fired thousands of rounds throughout the engagement. Ammunition bearers shuttled forward, carrying additional belts that kept the weapon supplied during critical moments. The sergeant maintained fire discipline despite stress and exhaustion, continuing to fire controlled bursts even as German forces came within grenade range of his position. The weapon never failed, despite temperatures that caused lubricants to thicken, despite sustained firing that tested air cooling limits, despite rough handling during barrel changes accomplished under fire. The M1919A4 continued functioning. Every trigger pull produced fire. Every belt fed smoothly. The mechanism that critics had questioned as unreliable performed flawlessly when failure would have meant death. German casualties mounted until attacking units lost cohesion. Officers attempting to rally troops for renewed assault found their soldiers unwilling to cross open ground, swept by fire that seemed never to slacken. The battalion strength attack failed to penetrate the American perimeter. German forces withdrew to regroup, having suffered casualties that severely degraded their combat effectiveness. The sergeant maintained his position throughout the day, expecting renewed assault that never materialized. German commanders, realizing that this sector's defenses were too strong to penetrate without unacceptable casualties, shifted efforts elsewhere. The machine gun position that had seemed insignificant in the overall defense had prevented penetration that might have collapsed entire defensive sector. This engagement, multiplied across the Bastogne perimeter and throughout the Ardennes battlefield, demonstrated the M1919A4's genuine battlefield value. Critics who had questioned the weapon's reliability found their concerns answered by performance under conditions that exceeded peacetime testing parameters. The weapon proved capable of sustained fire when properly employed by trained crews. Its lighter weight enabled tactical mobility that heavier weapons could not match. The combination of firepower and mobility made it an ideal weapon for mobile defense that characterized the Ardennes campaign. Similar stories emerged from other sectors and units throughout the campaign. A machine gun team attached to an armored infantry company stopped a German assault force attempting to overrun an isolated American position near Saint-Vith. The crew fired more than 3,000 rounds during the engagement, changing barrels repeatedly while under direct fire. The weapon continued functioning throughout, breaking the German attack and enabling the surrounded American force to hold until relief arrived. Near Elsenborn Ridge, machine gun crews from the 2nd Infantry Division established defensive positions that channeled German penetration attempts into killing zones, where concentrated fire destroyed attacking formations. The crews employed their weapons with devastating precision, coordinating fire to create interlocking coverage that prevented German forces from identifying gaps in the defenses. German casualties in this sector reached levels that forced attacking commanders to abandon attempts to penetrate and seek alternative routes. Throughout the Ardennes campaign, the M1919A4 proved its worth in conditions that tested every aspect of its design. Extreme cold threatened to freeze mechanisms. Sustained combat demanded reliability over extended periods. Ammunition shortages required careful conservation. Maintenance occurred under difficult conditions with limited supplies, yet the weapon continued performing, providing the firepower that enabled outnumbered American forces to contain the German offensive until reinforcements arrived and weather cleared enough to permit air support. The Bastogne defense also highlighted the importance of crew cohesion and mutual trust. Machine gun teams functioned as small units where each member's contribution proved essential to success. The gunner controlled fire and selected targets. The assistant gunner fed ammunition, changed barrels, and provided security for the position. Ammunition bearers ensured steady supply during critical moments. This division of labor required seamless coordination under extreme stress. Teams that had trained together and fought together developed almost instinctive understanding that enabled them to function effectively, even when communication became difficult or impossible. The psychological resilience demonstrated by machine gun crews during the Ardennes offensive deserves recognition. These men faced extended periods of intense combat, knowing that their positions attracted concentrated enemy fire. They witnessed comrades killed or wounded. They endured cold that numbed extremities and exhaustion that dulled reflexes. Yet they maintained their positions and continued performing their duties because they understood that their unit's survival depended on their steadfastness. This psychological dimension of combat effectiveness, often overlooked in technical analyses, proved as important as mechanical reliability in determining outcomes. The M1919A4's performance during World War II transformed American machine gun doctrine. Pre-war theories emphasizing firepower density gave way to concepts that balanced firepower with mobility. Commanders learned that dispersed positions occupied by mobile machine gun teams often proved more effective than concentrated positions with heavier weapons. This doctrinal evolution reflected hard-won battlefield lessons about the relationship between firepower, mobility, and survivability. Machine gun employment in offensive operations particularly benefited from the M1919A4's characteristics. Attacking forces needed suppressive fire to fix defenders and enable maneuver elements to close with enemy positions. However, machine guns positioned too far from advancing infantry could not adjust fire quickly enough to support fluid situations. The M1919A4's portability enabled gun crews to advance with assault elements, establishing positions that provided covering fire at critical moments. Techniques developed through battlefield experience illustrated this evolution. Platoon leaders learned to employ machine guns in pairs, with one weapon providing covering fire while the second displaced to forward positions. This technique, called bounding overwatch, maintained continuous suppressive fire while advancing weapons closer to objectives. The M1919A4's weight made such tactics practical, where heavier weapons would have required excessive time to displace. Integration with combined arms teams represented another tactical innovation. Tank infantry cooperation proved essential in European combat, where defenders employed extensive anti-tank capabilities. Infantry protected tanks from close-range anti-tank weapons, while tanks provided mobile firepower that suppressed enemy positions. Machine guns bridged the gap, providing sustained fire that suppressed anti-tank teams while remaining mobile enough to advance with armor. Armored infantry, troops mounted in half-tracks that accompanied tank formations, found the M1919A4 ideal for their requirements. Vehicles mounted machine guns that provided fire support during mounted operations. When troops dismounted to assault defended positions, crews quickly transferred weapons to tripod mounts that enabled precision fire. This flexibility enabled rapid transition between mobile and static employment modes that matched the fluid nature of armored warfare. Critics remained despite the weapon's combat success. Some officers argued that the army should have retained water-cooled weapons in greater numbers, accepting reduced mobility to ensure absolute reliability during sustained engagements. They pointed to situations where air-cooled weapons had failed under extreme conditions, arguing that such failures could prove catastrophic in critical tactical situations. These criticisms overlooked the broader tactical context that determined optimal equipment choices. Modern warfare's mobility demands created situations where perfect reliability in static positions mattered less than adequate reliability in mobile employment. Forces that could not maneuver quickly enough to exploit opportunities or avoid threats would find themselves defeated regardless of their weapons' sustained fire capabilities. The M1919A4 provided sufficient reliability for most tactical situations while enabling mobility that often proved decisive. Comparative analysis with enemy weapon systems illuminated the M1919A4's strengths and weaknesses. German forces employed the MG-34 and later MG-42 machine guns that featured higher rates of fire and simpler barrel change procedures. These weapons proved devastating in defensive positions where German forces exploited superior fields of fire. However, their complex mechanisms required careful maintenance and proved sensitive to environmental contamination. American forces frequently captured German machine guns, rendered inoperative by mud or freezing temperatures. Soviet forces employed weapons across the reliability spectrum. The Maxim gun, a water-cooled design dating to the 19th century, provided absolute reliability but at severe mobility cost. The later Goryunov SG-43 offered characteristics similar to the M1919A4, balancing firepower and portability. Soviet doctrine emphasizing mass and aggressive offensive action valued weapons that enabled rapid advance more than those providing maximum sustained fire capability. Japanese forces, encountered by American units in the Pacific, employed both modern and obsolete machine guns. The Type 92 heavy machine gun, a holdover from earlier periods, required extensive logistical support but provided reliable firepower. Lighter weapons like the Type 96 and Type 99 offered portability at the cost of sustained fire capability. American forces generally judged their machine gun superiority significant advantage in Pacific combat, where Japanese forces often attacked in mass formations vulnerable to sustained automatic fire. The M1919A4's characteristics influenced post-war machine gun development. Designers recognized that future conflicts would demand even greater mobility. As mechanized forces dominated battlefields, they sought weapons that maintained the M1919A4's reliability while reducing weight and improving sustained fire capability. These efforts produced weapons like the M60 that incorporated lessons learned through decades of M1919A4 employment. However, the M1919A4 itself remained in service long after World War II ended. Korean War combat demonstrated the weapon's continued utility in conditions that tested its limits. Korean terrain, alternating between mountainous regions and narrow valleys, created tactical situations similar to Italian campaign conditions. The M1919A4's portability enabled crews to establish positions on high ground, while its sustained fire capability proved essential during Chinese mass assaults that threatened to overwhelm defensive positions through numerical superiority. The winter of 1950-51 in Korea presented conditions even more extreme than those experienced during the Ardennes campaign. Temperatures dropped to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. Weapons froze solid, if not constantly maintained. Lubricants turned to gel. Ammunition fed poorly as metal contracted in the cold, yet properly maintained M1919A4s continued functioning, providing the firepower necessary to stop Chinese human wave attacks that might otherwise have overrun defensive positions. At the Chosin Reservoir, Marine machine gun crews employed M1919A4s to devastating effect against Chinese forces attacking in darkness. The crews established overlapping fields of fire that created killing zones through which attacking forces had to pass. Chinese casualties reached staggering levels as wave after wave of assault troops ran into machine gun fire that never seemed to slacken. The Marines held their positions despite being surrounded and outnumbered, in large part because their machine guns continued functioning when other weapons failed in the extreme cold. Vietnam-era employment illustrated the weapon's adaptability to different combat environments. Though by then considered obsolete and largely replaced by more modern designs, M1919A4s remained in service with some units and Allied forces. The weapon's mechanical reliability proved valuable in tropical conditions, where more complex designs experienced reliability problems due to heat and humidity. Its heavy 30-06 cartridge penetrated jungle vegetation more effectively than lighter rounds, enabling engagement of targets that smaller caliber weapons could not reach. River patrol boats in the Mekong Delta mounted M1919A4s as defensive armament. The weapons provided reliable firepower during ambush situations where mechanical failure could prove fatal. Crews appreciated the weapon's simplicity and robustness, characteristics that proved more valuable than higher rates of fire or other features of more modern designs. The M1919A4's long service life testified to fundamental soundness of Browning's original design principles. The adaptation of M1919A4 employment techniques to different theaters and conflicts demonstrated American military forces' capacity for tactical innovation. Crews developed theater-specific techniques that addressed unique challenges posed by different environments and enemy tactics. Desert warfare demanded particular attention to preventing sand infiltration. Mountain combat required techniques for establishing positions on steep terrain. Jungle fighting necessitated methods for engaging targets obscured by vegetation. This adaptive approach, building on core principles while modifying specifics to match circumstances, exemplified effective military learning. The transformation of the M1919A4 from questioned design to legendary weapon illustrates broader truths about military innovation and institutional adaptation. Organizations naturally resist change, particularly when change requires abandoning familiar systems for uncertain alternatives. This resistance serves valuable purposes, preventing adoption of faddish concepts that promise much but deliver little. However, excessive resistance can prevent necessary adaptation to changing circumstances. The debate over the M1919A4 reflected this tension. Conservative officers who questioned air cooling raised legitimate concerns based on their understanding of machine gun employment. Their experience taught that sustained fire capability determined machine gun effectiveness. Water cooling provided this capability absolutely. Abandoning water cooling seemed to compromise the fundamental characteristic that made machine guns tactically valuable. Progressive officers who championed the M1919A4 recognized that changed tactical circumstances required different equipment characteristics. Modern warfare's emphasis on mobility meant that weapons lacking portability became tactical liabilities regardless of their sustained fire capabilities. They argued that adequate reliability in mobile employment exceeded perfect reliability in static positions because modern tactics minimized opportunities for static defense. Both perspectives contained validity. The challenge involved determining which factors would prove most important under actual combat conditions. Peacetime analysis could not resolve this question definitively because combat stress, confusion, and lethality create conditions impossible to replicate during testing. Only battlefield experience could demonstrate whether the M1919A4's characteristics matched modern tactical requirements. That experience ultimately vindicated the progressive perspective while validating some conservative concerns. The M1919A4 proved reliable enough for most tactical situations while providing mobility that often proved decisive. However, situations existed where water-cooled weapons' superior sustained fire capability would have been preferable. Optimal outcomes resulted from maintaining both weapon types in inventory, employing each according to tactical circumstances. This conclusion reflected maturation of American military thinking about equipment procurement and employment. Rather than seeking single optimal solutions, planners increasingly recognized that different tactical situations demanded different tool sets. Flexibility and adaptability became valued characteristics that enabled effective response to unpredictable circumstances. The human dimension of the M1919A4's success deserves emphasis. Weapons perform only as well as operators employ them. Superior design cannot compensate for poor training, inadequate maintenance, or improper tactical employment. The M1919A4 succeeded because American military training systems produced crews who understood their weapons thoroughly and employed them skillfully under difficult conditions. The sergeant who defended his position during the Bastogne battle exemplified these qualities. His technical mastery enabled him to keep his weapon functioning throughout extended engagement under brutal conditions. His tactical understanding informed target selection and fire control that maximized effectiveness while conserving ammunition. His determination sustained him through hours of combat that would have broken lesser men. Thousands of similar examples occurred throughout the war, most unrecorded, except in fading memories of survivors. These individual instances of skill and courage accumulated into strategic effect. American firepower superiority resulted not from technological advantages alone, but from combination of adequate equipment, superior training, and individual determination that proved greater than the sum of component parts. Modern military forces studying this history can extract multiple lessons. Technology matters, but human factors often prove more important than marginal technical advantages. Training requires investment of time and resources that organizations under resource constraints are tempted to reduce. Maintenance demands discipline and attention to detail that combats chaos makes difficult to sustain. Victory belongs to forces that master these challenges, not merely those possessing latest equipment. The M1919A4 also illustrates the importance of institutional learning and adaptation. Early combat experience revealed problems with the weapon's employment and maintenance. Rather than abandoning the design or persisting with ineffective practices, American forces modified training, refined doctrine, and developed techniques that addressed shortcomings while exploiting strengths. This adaptive approach enabled continuous improvement throughout the war. Such adaptation requires organizational cultures that encourage honest assessment and rapid dissemination of lessons learned. Military organizations naturally tend toward rigid hierarchies and standardized procedures that resist change. Combat effectiveness demands balancing necessary standardization with flexibility that enables adaptation to circumstances. Forces achieving this balance gain decisive advantages over more rigid opponents. The weapon's endurance across multiple conflicts speaks to fundamental soundness of Browning's original design. While specific features became obsolete as technology advanced, core principles that Browning incorporated remained valid. Simplicity, robustness, and ease of maintenance prove their value across changing tactical circumstances. These characteristics enable weapons to remain effective even as warfare evolves. The M1919A4's influence extended beyond direct military employment into broader American culture. The weapon became symbol of American industrial might and military prowess. Images of American soldiers manning M1919A4s appeared in countless photographs, newsreels, and films that shaped public perception of the war effort. The weapon represented American determination to defeat fascism through combination of industrial capacity and fighting spirit. Veterans returning from war carried memories of the M1919A4's reliability in situations where their lives depended on mechanical function. These personal experiences created lasting impressions that influenced subsequent careers in military service, defense industry, or civilian life. Many veterans maintained lifelong appreciation for the weapon that had served them so well in desperate circumstances. The weapon appeared in numerous military museums and collections, preserved as testament to its historical significance. Collectors sought examples of the M1919A4, valuing both its historical importance and its representation of American military heritage. Shooting enthusiasts appreciated the weapon's mechanical elegance and continued functionality decades after manufacture. Film and literature incorporated the M1919A4 as symbol of American military power. War movies featured dramatic scenes of machine gun crews defending positions against overwhelming odds. Military fiction included detailed descriptions of the weapon's employment in combat. These cultural representations, while sometimes exaggerating for dramatic effect, reflected genuine appreciation for the weapon's combat effectiveness. The weapon's legacy influenced subsequent generations of military equipment development. Engineers designing modern infantry weapons studied the M1919A4's characteristics, seeking to understand what made it effective across diverse combat environments and extended service life. They recognized that technical sophistication matters less than reliability, maintainability, and ease of employment under difficult conditions. Current military doctrine governing machine gun employment reflects lessons learned through decades of M1919A4 use. Concepts of fire discipline, tactical positioning, and integration with maneuver elements trace lineage to techniques developed when the M1919A4 equipped American forces. Modern soldiers study historical examples of effective machine gun employment, learning from predecessors who proved these concepts under fire. The M1919A4 Browning machine gun entered military service burdened by doubt. Experts questioned whether air cooling could provide adequate reliability. Procurement officials worried about adopting designs that departed from proven patterns. Combat veterans, trained on water-cooled weapons, viewed the lighter machine gun with suspicion, born from experience that taught the cost of equipment failure in combat. These concerns proved simultaneously valid and irrelevant. Valid because the M1919A4 did have limitations compared to water-cooled predecessors. Barrels could not sustain fire indefinitely without changing. The weapon demanded disciplined employment that inexperienced crews might not maintain under stress. Critics correctly identified these characteristics as departures from established patterns. Yet concerns proved irrelevant because changed tactical circumstances rendered characteristics that earlier generations valued as less important than new requirements. Mobility became paramount in warfare, dominated by mechanized forces and fluid operations. Firepower that could not reposition quickly became vulnerable to counter-battery fire and less useful for supporting maneuver. The M1919A4 provided adequate firepower while enabling mobility that proved tactically decisive in circumstances that increasingly characterized modern combat. The transformation of institutional skepticism into acceptance required both battlefield validation and cultural adaptation. Individual instances of success, like the sergeant's defense during the Ardennes offensive, provided concrete evidence that challenged abstract concerns. As positive experiences accumulated and crews gained confidence through successful employment, opinion shifted from skepticism toward acceptance and eventually to appreciation. This evolution reflected broader American cultural characteristics that proved militarily valuable. American pragmatism emphasized results over theory. When the M1919A4 produced tactical success, philosophical concerns about its design became less important. American adaptability enabled rapid incorporation of lessons that improved employment techniques. American material abundance ensured adequate supply of ammunition and spare parts that enabled crews to exploit the weapon's capabilities fully. The relationship between warriors and their weapons deserves recognition. A machine gun represents more than mechanical device. It becomes extension of the crew that employs it, familiar friend whose characteristics they know intimately. Soldiers develop confidence in weapons that perform reliably, creating psychological foundation that enables effective performance under stress. The M1919A4 earned this confidence through performance that validated trust soldiers placed in it. That confidence proved contagious. Units employed M1919A4s effectively developed reputations for reliable firepower that influenced enemy behavior. German forces, learning that they faced American machine gun positions, altered their tactics, becoming more cautious and less aggressive. This psychological effect amplified the weapon's physical impact, creating tactical advantages beyond those attributable to casualties inflicted. The broader strategic context illuminates the M1919A4's importance to American military effectiveness during World War II. American forces faced qualitative disadvantages in some equipment categories compared to German opponents. German tanks incorporated heavier armor and more powerful guns than early American armor. German infantry employed machine guns with higher rates of fire. German combined arms doctrine, refined through years of combat, initially proved superior to American approaches. American advantages lay elsewhere. Superior logistics ensured that American forces rarely lacked supplies or equipment. Better training produced soldiers who employed weapons more effectively than theoretical capabilities suggested. More flexible command culture enabled rapid adaptation to battlefield lessons. The M1919A4 exemplified these advantages, providing reliable firepower that American logistics could sustain and American soldiers could employ skillfully. The weapon's legacy extends beyond its service life into influence on subsequent designs and continuing relevance to understanding military effectiveness. Modern infantry weapons incorporate lessons learned through decades of M1919A4 employment. Designers balance firepower, weight, and reliability according to principles that World War II experience established. Doctrine governing machine gun employment reflects tactical concepts developed when the M1919A4 equipped American forces. Perhaps most importantly, the M1919A4 story reminds us that military effectiveness results from complex interaction of technology, training, doctrine, and human factors. Superior equipment alone guarantees nothing. The M1919A4 succeeded not because it represented technological breakthrough, but because it provided adequate capabilities that American forces learned to employ effectively. This combination of sufficient technology, superior training, and individual skill created tactical advantages that accumulated into strategic success. The sergeant defending Bastogne's perimeter understood none of this analysis. He knew only that German forces threatened his position, that his weapon gave him means to stop them, and that duty demanded he employ it effectively regardless of cost. His technical mastery came from countless hours of training. His tactical judgment reflected lessons learned through multiple campaigns. His determination sprang from sources beyond analysis: commitment to comrades, professional pride, fundamental belief in his cause. These human qualities transformed the M1919A4 from questioned design into legendary weapon. The gun did not stop the German battalion through mechanical superiority. The sergeant stopped them, employing his weapon with skill born from preparation and courage summoned in necessity's moment. The M1919A4 proved reliable because he made it reliable through proper employment that compensated for limitations while exploiting strengths. This relationship between warrior and weapon represents warfare's essential truth. Technology matters, but human spirit matters more. Training provides foundation, but determination provides will. Equipment enables action, but courage makes action effective. The M1919A4 became legendary, not through inherent superiority, but through service in hands of warriors who transformed adequate tools into instruments of victory. Contemporary observers watching machine gun fire tear through attacking formations saw only mechanical efficiency. They witnessed bullets striking targets, soldiers falling, attacks faltering. What they could not see was the accumulated preparation that enabled such efficiency. Years of training that built technical mastery. Months of combat that developed tactical judgment. Moments of choice when warriors decided to hold positions despite fear and exhaustion. The M1919A4 carried into battle all this invisible preparation. Each burst of fire represented not merely mechanical function, but human decision. Where to aim, when to fire, how long to maintain pressure. These choices, made in fractions of seconds under indescribable stress, determined whether attacks succeeded or failed. The weapon provided means, but warriors provided judgment that transformed means into effective action. Critics who questioned the M1919A4's reliability focused on mechanical limitations while overlooking human factors that proved more important. They worried about barrels overheating without recognizing that proper fire discipline would prevent such problems. They concerned themselves with theoretical limitations while discounting practical reality, that combat demands different characteristics than peacetime analysis suggests. Battlefield experience taught what analysis could not, that reliability emerges from interaction between weapon and warrior. The M1919A4 proved reliable because American training produced crews who understood how to employ it reliably. They learned its characteristics, adapted to its requirements, and developed techniques that maximized effectiveness while preventing failures. This human adaptation transformed adequate design into reliable tool. The transformation of doubt into legend required time, experience, and countless individual proofs of effectiveness. The M1919A4 could not argue its case through words. It proved itself through performance, engagement by engagement, battle by battle, throughout campaigns that spanned continents and years. Gradually, as evidence accumulated, skepticism gave way to acceptance and finally to appreciation for weapon that had served so effectively. This process of validation through performance reflects how military institutions ideally function. Initial skepticism ensures rigorous evaluation that prevents adoption of inadequate equipment. Openness to evidence enables recognition when doubts prove unfounded. Willingness to adapt permits incorporation of lessons that improve effectiveness. American military culture, despite flaws and failures in many areas, demonstrated these characteristics sufficiently to enable effective prosecution of the most demanding conflict in human history. The M1919A4 Browning machine gun served American forces from World War II through conflicts decades later. It equipped infantry divisions, armored units, and special operations forces. It defended positions, supported attacks, and provided firepower across every theater where American forces fought. Throughout this service, it maintained reputation for reliability that early critics would have considered impossible. That reputation rested on foundation built through countless individual instances of effective performance under difficult conditions. Each time a crew maintained their weapon functioning through extended engagement, reliability's legend grew stronger. Each time the weapon performed when failure meant death, confidence increased. Each successful employment validated design choices that skeptics had questioned. The sergeant at Bastogne contributed one thread to this larger tapestry. His successful defense of his position represented a single incident among thousands that occurred throughout the war. Yet such incidents, accumulated across time and space, created the historical record that transformed the M1919A4 from questioned design into legendary weapon. They proved that critics' concerns, while not entirely unfounded, mattered less than the weapon's actual battlefield effectiveness. Looking back across decades, we can recognize that the debate over the M1919A4 represented more than technical disagreement about machine gun design. It reflected deeper questions about how military forces balance competing requirements, how institutions manage change, and how organizations learn from experience. The weapon's successful service provides answers to these questions that remain relevant as modern forces face their own challenges of adaptation and innovation. The M1919A4's transformation from doubt to legend teaches that reliability is not inherent quality of weapons, but emergent property of systems that include equipment, training, doctrine, and human factors. It demonstrates that skepticism serves valuable purposes, but must yield to evidence when experience contradicts theoretical concerns. It illustrates that battlefield effectiveness results from complex interactions that defy simple analysis, but reward careful preparation and determined execution. Above all, the M1919A4's story reminds us that weapons matter less than warriors who employ them. Superior equipment provides advantages, but skill and determination prove more important. The gun that critics called unreliable became the weapon that stopped German Battalion, not through mechanical perfection, but through service in hands of warriors who refused to fail. That combination of adequate tool and extraordinary human spirit created the legend that survives long after the guns fell silent and the warriors who wielded them passed into history. Their legacy endures in weapons that bear their mark, in doctrine that reflects their lessons, and in example that inspires those who follow. The M1919A4 proved reliable because American warriors made it reliable. They transformed doubt into legend through preparation that preceded battle, skill demonstrated during combat, and determination that refused to accept defeat. This is the weapon's true legacy, not technical specifications or mechanical characteristics, but testament to human capacity to overcome limitations through courage, skill, and unwavering commitment to duty. The echoes of that legacy resound through military institutions today. Training programs incorporate lessons learned when the M1919A4 equipped American forces. Tactical doctrine reflects concepts proven under fire. Equipment development considers principles validated through decades of combat employment. Most importantly, warriors preparing for uncertain future study examples set by predecessors who faced their own challenges with weapons that critics had questioned. Those predecessors proved that doubt transforms into legend not through perfect equipment, but through imperfect humans who refuse to let imperfection become excuse for failure. They showed that reliability emerges not from testing facilities, but from frozen fighting positions where failure means death. They demonstrated that true measure of military equipment lies not in technical specifications, but in performance, when everything hangs in the balance and warriors discover whether their tools will serve or fail them. The M1919A4 served. Through frozen Belgian forests and scorching Pacific islands, through Korean mountains and Vietnamese jungles, through every condition that tests metal and spirit alike, the weapon performed. It performed because American warriors made it perform, maintaining it constantly, employing it skillfully, trusting it completely even when critics suggested such trust was misplaced. That trust proved justified. The weapon that entered service burdened by doubt became the gun that defined American firepower for a generation. Critics who questioned its reliability found their concerns answered by performance that exceeded predictions and transformed skepticism into appreciation. The M1919A4 Browning machine gun, dismissed as unreliable, became the weapon that stopped battalions, defended perimeters, and helped win the war that decided the 20th century's course. This transformation from doubt to legend represents more than vindication of specific design choices. It stands as testament to human capacity to adapt, overcome, and succeed despite limitations. It reminds us that perfection matters less than excellence, that adequate tools in skilled hands outperform superior equipment employed poorly, and that victory belongs not to those with best weapons, but to warriors who make their weapons best through skill, determination, and refusal to accept defeat.